God is greater, our God is stronger. God, you are higher than any other. Our God is healer, awesome in power. Our God.
Got it. Good morning, church family. I am so glad to be with you this morning, and I'm so glad that all of you are here. That is encouraging to me, and I really, really appreciate it. I want to mention just before we get started that next Sunday, as you're aware, is our fall festival, where we're going to spend some time reaching out to the young people and the children and the family and families with young children in this community next Sunday afternoon. And I know many of you are already signed up to work in that, and I appreciate you doing that. And Dennis asked us to be reminded that he would sure appreciate if we had 40 to 50 dozen cookies ready for next Sunday. So the order's been placed. If y'all would work on that, I really would appreciate it. And again, I welcome you this morning, and if I apologize for my slides. Some of them will be easier to see if you sit a little closer to the front. So if this is, if you feel like you need to move forward, please do so. And hopefully you can see everything all right. I'm still learning how this PowerPoint and ProPresenter thing works in there, so appreciate your patience with me. And I want to say, Mawuka Bieti, Muji Biepi. Good morning, or good day. And how are you? ¿Cómo está? Right? Buenos dias. Watch those steps. I'm pretty wound up with this morning to get a chance to speak to you about our trip to Africa. And I bring you greetings this morning from our brothers and sisters in Mumena, Zambia. And I had the privilege of being able to stand before them and greet them and give them your greetings and your love. And they send theirs to you this morning. They love this church. They love the Hillcrest Church. And they are so appreciative of what we have done in our mission efforts since about 2006. And they are just very, very appreciative, and they want to extend their greetings to you this morning. And they asked me to be sure to do that when I got up to speak. Derek is in East Texas this morning. I've been doing a gospel meeting, so this is a great time for us to do an update on the trip that Don Boyd and I took in September to Mumena, Zambia, which is a mission point that we've been involved in for a long time here at our church. And I'm going to do that this morning by sharing some details about our trip. And I want to share a little bit about the lives of the daily lives of our brothers and sisters. And I hope through that I can bring a word of encouragement and a message this morning. And from our experience and what I was able to see and experience there. It was my first time to go to Africa, to be on the African continent. It was a tremendous privilege, and I really enjoyed that. And so I wanted to share with you this morning what I saw from my perspective. And my brother Dwayne said, because I didn't know what to expect and when I went, and my brother Dwayne said, just be. Just go and be. And it was great. The brothers and sisters were great and so welcoming, and I was able to learn and see a lot, and I really, really appreciate that. I want to recognize first, before we get started, that Don and Rita Boyd are here with us this morning. Would you stand up, Don and Rita? Don and Rita are part of our first missionary team to Mumena, Zambia, beginning in about 2005, 2006 time frame. And they went with their daughter and son-in-law, Sandra and Brian Davis. And Brian is now the Chief Operating Officer for World Bible School. And Don and Rita and Brian and Sandra live in the Austin area. And Don works part-time for the World Bible School organization and church relations. And he still does a tremendous amount of traveling all over the world. And Don was our trip organizer and leader and mentor for me on this trip, and I really, really appreciate that. And I know that Don's heart is in Africa, and he has a great love for the people of Zambia, and they him. And we went to visit Brother Mutapila here while we were there. 94 years old. Don and baptized him when he was in his 80s, the head man of his village. And you'll see some pictures of a bunch of children in the village here in a minute, and all of them descended from this man. And he's just a remarkable gentleman, and we really appreciate that, Don and Rita's work. And I also want to recognize Sam and Ellie Rodriguez. If you would stand up, please, Sam and Ellie. Sam and Ellie spent several years over there as part of our mission team. And along with another couple, Rick and Karen Love, and then Brooke Bart Brewington, right? So we, well, I'll tell a little more about that. So I just, Rick and Karen now live in Tennessee, and I really found a new respect for our brothers and sisters that go full time in the mission field. Don tells me that there's no better life than the life of a missionary. And I believe it. In many ways, I believe it, but I also recognize that it's not easy. And I have a new respect for all of you that have done that. And I want to recognize, too, some brothers who have gone and done what Don and I did this trip. So Robin Worsham, he's been, and Cliff Willis, Derek Pritchard, Rob Frankie, I believe Ron McClung has been, and several other former members went and helped with some building projects and things like that when we were getting started in our mission work there. So just as a reminder, Zambia is in southern Africa. It was a British colony. It achieved its independence in 1964. I guess they're going to celebrate their Independence Day on October the 24th, Wednesday. Is that right? Zambian Independence Day. And we, our work was centered in a place called Mumena, Zambia, which is just outside of Solwezi up here in the northwestern province. So if you see the red dot where it says the city Solwezi, about 30 miles south and west of Solwezi is this area of Mumena, the Mumena chieftaincy, and that's where we went. We flew into Lusaka and then got a regional commuter plane into Solwezi. And in the 1960s, 1970s, I'm going to use approximate date, that's Don, but apparently a nonprofit organization out of Europe came to the Mumena chieftaincy at the request or with the permission of the chief at that time, who's the grandfather of the current chief, His Royal Highness Jonathan Mumena. Chief Jonathan Mumena is the current chief. So his grandfather allowed this nonprofit to come in the 60s, 70s to help with education, farming techniques, and things like that. And so this group built a compound with several houses and buildings for a school. This is a picture of the primary school there. And I'm standing looking at the school from the restroom facilities for that school. They're about 75 yards apart. And thought that was pretty interesting. And see some of the school facilities that are there. Of course, they built several houses and barns and outbuildings there, and dug some wells. There's some children at the well in that compound area, or one of the wells in that compound area. And the chief, I don't know, maybe in the late 90s, this nonprofit organization abandoned this effort that they were doing. And the current chief, Chief Mumena, through his contacts with Don and Rita and Brian and Sandra and the Hillcrest, asked for people to come to Zambia to teach his people the gospel of Jesus Christ. The chief is a devout believer in Jesus Christ and very humble and wise man. I'll talk about him in a second. And so we partnered with the Hillcrest Church of Christ, and each of us sent members of a mission team to Mumena, and this compound, this area where we work or based out of, was renamed the Mumena Christian Outreach Center, a ministry of the Churches of Christ. And so in the course of our efforts, 17, 19 churches were planted in the various villages within a 20 or 25 mile radius around the center here in this chieftaincy of Mumena. I think 17 are still active, vibrant churches. Here's some of the houses, or the house that we stayed in. It's really a duplex. On the right side is Karen, and where Rick and Karen Love lived, and Sam and Ellie, and maybe Don and Rita for a time lived on the side on the left there. And that's where we stayed, and it was a great place to stay. And that's for you, Miss Ellie. There's Zacchaeus, because he's a wee little man, isn't he? Ellie had to leave her dog there when she came home, but we got a picture of Zacchaeus in there. It was a great facility and a place to stay, and this is what Don and I were doing on the trip. So twice a year, the leaders from the church, from the various churches in the various villages, come together in April and in September to do 2 weeks of Bible studies. Now, just stop and think about that for a minute, right? How many of us are going to dedicate a month of our year in focused Bible study? These men do it twice a year, after planting and after harvest. And so we were there after the harvest in September, and Don and I had the privilege to teach or lead them in studies. We studied together, really. And so in the mornings, for 2 weeks, I was privileged to be able to study the books of Galatians and the book of Colossians. And in the afternoon, Don and another brother from Lusaka came up, and they shared and studied through the book of Acts. And we had 22 men from 11 different congregations come to the classes. They stayed in some dormitories that were built there by this nonprofit, and they stayed in those dormitories. They came from all these villages, and we had a brother that cooked for them, and these were just some tremendous brothers, and brothers of faith and joy, and I'll talk more about them, but you know, one that impressed me the most is this brother in the middle right here in the red shirt and the red cap and the glasses, Brother Kanda Kanda. And notice how he's squatting there and his ability just to move and be flexible. He rode a bicycle to the event, 86 years old. Yeah, and the gentleman on the lower right here, Smacks, he's 88. I told Sue when I got home, I was like, well, I need to start walking 10 miles a day every day. These guys, they're amazing. And and none of this kind of effort gets done. I just want to praise and call out my brothers who really led and organized this event. None of this gets done, as you know, when we put a retreat together. We're going on a retreat with high school students next week, and Suzanne's already planning the meals, and Matt's been planning the logistics of all of that. None of this kind of event gets done without a lot of logistical planning, and these brothers did that. Brother James Kempalumba on the left, Brother Eliak, and Brother Edward, and Brother Cosmas. Particularly James and Cosmas, they organized this whole event and established the menu, set the budget, and then we went shopping in the market to get the food for the couple of weeks as they were going to feed the brothers, and that was quite an experience to get to go into the market. I don't know how frequently the Muzungos go in that part of the market. I don't know, so I kind of stood out carrying the stuff they were buying and everything. It was really fascinating, and I enjoyed getting to go through that. And they did a tremendous job, and they set a new standard for the cost of meals. Suzanne, I thought I'd mention that to you. So they were able to plan and put the meals together for 2 weeks for these men for about 30 cents a meal. So I don't know that we'll be able to get that done for our retreats, but I thought of you. Well, they were planning all that. And our brother Gift cooked for us. He's cooking Shima, and outside the dormitory where the brothers were staying, and the sister Priska helped him. And he worked 2 weeks, hard weeks, cooking 3 meals a day, and just great. I believe our work was well received. I really had a good time, Don. And I think it was well received. And I think they were encouraged. And I felt a little bit like Paul, or one of the travelers with Paul, going with Paul back to the churches that they planted to help encourage the brothers there. And it was really a privilege to get to go. And I think we encouraged them because these men teach and preach and pastor their congregations. So these are the church leaders for your brothers and sisters across those congregations in those various villages. And so it was great to get to study with them. And my purpose this morning, is I want to share a report on what we did is also, because I found it so interesting, is to give you a glimpse and insight into their daily lives. Because I think that is where I began to form the key takeaway that I had out of this trip, and that I want to share with you, that I think is relevant for us. And first of all, Zambia is a beautiful country. The northwestern province of Zambia is a beautiful country. And this is the view off the front porch of this house where Sam and Ellie lived. And there's your big agave plant there. And it was just before rain on this first Sunday night we were there. It was a beautiful picture. It's my favorite picture of all those that I took. And there's a jacaranda tree, or our Spanish brothers say jacaranda tree. It's a great place in Venus to go eat Mexican food if you like authentic Mexican food, called Casa Jacaranda. And the ladies that run that, apparently these trees grow in Mexico as well, and so that's what that restaurant's named for. But that's pretty cool. Beautiful trees in full bloom and so fragrant. This is from the hill that Don said he'd like to build a house on someday. It's a beautiful country, and the center is in a pretty remote place, actually, off the highway a good bit. There's our brother Leonard Majala. This is an interesting gentleman. There's 73 dialects or thereabouts in the Zambian language in Zambia. He speaks all of them, and about half of the 60-something dialects in Angola. So it's not often you get to meet a man who knows more than 100 languages, and the people are beautiful. The children are beautiful. And they were so respectful. And they would bow and give the greeting. They were just precious. So much opportunity for children's ministry. I know you fell in love with them, didn't you, Ellie? And they you. Those were Edward's children, and then this is from Brother Mutapila's village. There they are playing soccer on the just in the compound next to the school, next to the house where we were staying. And the children walk to school, to the school that's there in the center. And some of them walk a long way. One of our brother's daughters, 7th and 8th graders, we asked them how long they walk to school every day. 2 hours. Wow, 2 hours. And so if they can get a lift when we're driving by after school, they really love that. And this truck is only about 5 feet by 5 feet, so that's a lot of children. They were just so precious. And Rob, you'll appreciate the little green frisbees that the city of Cedar Hill had made, and we gave away at Elevate Cedar Hill. I took 2 or 3 of those. The kids had never played with a frisbee. And so one afternoon with the daughters of Patricia's daughters, I gave them a frisbee, we played with frisbee, and then next thing you know, we had 15 or 20 or 25 kids there. We're playing frisbee till I wore out, and then I gave it to them, said, here, y'all go play. And they were playing, so they're all playing with a green frisbee that says City of Cedar Hill on it, Rob. And so I want to talk a minute about the chief and give you an insight on the people's perspective. This is the sign on the wall outside the chief's palace compound. And it says where Jesus is king. And this man is a man of faith, and he reveres and honors Jesus as his king. And he's a good man. Spoken at the United Nations General Assembly before. He's been chairman of the House of Chiefs, which is their upper house, kind of the House of Lords in Zambia. Does some work with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, met with Bill and Melinda Gates several times. He's a great man, and he greeted us very warmly. He is royalty. You don't wear a hat in his presence, and you don't reach out to take his hand unless he extends it first. And, of course, he greeted us with great warmth and humility and love and a hug, which I wasn't expecting, but that was great. And but when his people come into His presence, they do it on their knees. They get down on their knees and greet their King. And He greets them warmly as well, but obviously observes the traditions and the culture and the respect of that. But our brothers and sisters understand the concept of kingship. We don't necessarily understand that concept very well in America, or we don't submit to much of anybody. This is a concept that we need to learn if we're going to follow Jesus Christ. These brothers understand that. And part of the big messaging that our missionaries have done, because that's culturally relevant in their culture, Jesus is King. And that's a message that we keep going over and over, and it's a very easy message to give because it's right out of the Bible, right? And so we really enjoyed that. He gives the people land to live on and to farm, and if troublemakers cause problems, then He can send them out of the chieftaincy, right? The people are very industrious people. They work hard. They make their own bricks to build their houses and fire their own bricks, and they make it out of the dirt of the termite mounds. And this is a stack of bricks that they're getting ready to fire that they will use in their building to build their houses and to build their shelters or their kansanzas. This is our brother Edward's house and his wife and family, and the kansanza there is their kitchen. It's the gathering place of the home. And I told Sue, I said, well, if you ever get an idea to remodel our kitchen, I got the design for you, right? Yeah. But this is where they cook and gather, and just it's pretty amazing. They work very hard, as I said. This is a hoey. In our language, we would call that a hoe. And can you imagine cultivating an acre or two with that by hand? I'm talking till the land up and bed up the rows where you're going to plant the corn or potatoes or cabbages or carrots or whatever you're planting. The men and women both do this work, and it's very hard work. They do it by hand. They live very close to the earth, as Don said. Don told me, and that was so impressive to me. Corn is their staple diet, and a staple in their diet. They eat it in every meal. They typically take their corn and have it ground to a very fine powder called mealie meal, and that's what that brother was cooking in the picture where he was cooking. And they cooked that down to a paste, pretty thick paste, like thicker than mashed potatoes. And you eat that with every meal, and then whatever else you have with it, they call relish. In this case, that Wednesday night, they cooked for us, and we ate. We had fresh cabbage and chicken. That was a really special meal. It was a big meal that night, and we enjoyed that. There's the gift that the chief sent to the men one night, so they eat goat and chickens. And this is Brother Edward's chicken coops that he made those. That's pretty cool, isn't it? And that's where their chickens rest, and guinea fowl, and so they have, their pigs. Cosmos has a pig, and chickens, goats, guinea fowl, fresh vegetables. They raise all kind of fresh vegetables. They live very close to the earth, and they work hard. There's a gentleman carrying iron sheets or tin for his tin roof on his house from the market in Solwezi. Every village has a well in it, or a borehole as they call it, and they have good surface water and good groundwater, but not necessarily running water or electricity in most of their homes. In the compound where we stayed, they do, but out in the villages, they typically do not have electricity or running water, and so they have to carry your water every day, morning and night. I saw this picture of Lot. That's a 5-gallon bucket of water on those young ladies' heads, right? They, like I said, they live very close to the earth. It is a very simple life, but it's harder than ours, of course, in our modern conveniences. But I didn't see hunger. And I saw a lot of joy. And they worked to take care of their families and their neighbors. and live their lives every day, right? Just like we do. The same things are important to them. And it's a simple life, but it's a little harder than ours, of course. But I have great respect for them and the work that they do. And they live in an area with good fuel, trees for fuel, and good surface and groundwater and fertile soil. They have a good place to live. And they have a good chief that keeps justice and is fair and takes care of them, gives them a place to live and work. And I found that fascinating and really encouraging. They are a people of faith. Our brothers and sisters who have come to Jesus Christ are a people of faith. These are the brothers and sisters from the Compande Church, and where I was privileged to go the first Sunday morning we were there. And Don went to Conqua, and then the next Sunday I went to Conqua, and he went to Compande. And this church has two elders that they've appointed, Brother Harry Jakata and Brother Aaron Chilimbi. And our elders wrote them a letter, and I was privileged to be able to deliver that letter to those elders that Sunday morning. And they were so gracious and very welcoming. And there's the outside of the church building there. And as we sat there, the men sat on one side, the women on the other. And we took this picture before we were getting before church, before class. And then as people began to come in and sit down, we're getting ready for class. Brother Chilimbe started a song in their language, the language of the Keondi people, Kikeondi. And of course, I didn't understand the words, but I knew the song. I knew the song. It was How Great Thou Art. That was my mother's favorite song. We sang it at her funeral. Thank you, Matt, for leading it this morning. And there I sat, 8,000 miles from home, and listening to this song. And I just felt so connected. So connected to my brothers there, connected to my heritage, connected to all of you, and I couldn't help but marvel. Truly, God, how great Thou art. It was really encouraging. It set the stage for the 2 weeks that I was there for me. This is what I wrote in my journal about the men after our first week. And I just want to read it as we get into our message this morning. I'm amazed at the faith of these men and their devotion to holy living and helping their neighbors, especially those that belong to the family of believers. And that's something they're learning, by the way. That's not something that comes natural in their culture. Right? They know that if their behavior is not consistent with their message, then it is totally hollow and they will disgrace their king. And most importantly, they understand with great humility that they live like this not in order to receive their salvation, but because they have already received it. Right? They are imbued with a sense of purpose to tell other people about Jesus. This, my friends, is Christianity in practice. It's not a hypothetical or an academic theology to them. And it's not complicated. That was one of the big things I learned out of that I saw. I think that's a lesson for us, and that's my point. And when I saw these images, and when I visited with these brothers, and I saw their daily lives lived in faith and very simplistic living every day, this is the passage that came to me. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy, and my burden is light. And as I contemplate that, I couldn't help but think that in our 21st century America, in the practice of our religion, sometimes we really overcomplicate it, don't we? Academically, theologically, organizationally, stylistically, culturally. And what I was reminded of in Africa is this simple truth, that Jesus invites us to belong to Him and live like we do, right? In everything we do. And as we go about our daily lives just simply living, I just want to expand on this passage just a few minutes as we close our time together this morning. Jesus says, come to me. Come to me. Come to me. Not come to the church. Not come to something that my disciples are going to write later. Not some practice of religion or system of rule keeping, right? Don't come to your peers that have your same worldview or mindset that may happen to also be Christians to find rest. You're not going to find rest there. You need to find rest in me, Jesus says. Come to me. And we say, well, who are you, Jesus? And in Matthew chapter 11, you have to get a picture of who Jesus is. And he says that before we get to Matthew chapter 11, verse 28. Way up in verse 4 and 5, John's apostles, John the Baptist apostles, are asking Jesus, hey, are you the one that was to come, or should we look for somebody else? And Jesus gives the disciples this answer. Go back and report to John what you hear and see. The blind receive sight, the lame walk, those who have leprosy are cleansed, the deaf hear, the dead are raised, and the good news is proclaimed to the poor. You see, Jesus tells John's disciples to go back and tell him that I am the one, Jesus says, that's achieving the impossible, that's making the unbelievable become reality, right? That's giving hope and purpose to the poor. And then secondly, he says in verse 27 of chapter 11, all things have been committed to me by my Father, and no one knows the Son except the Father, and no one knows the Father except the Son, and those to whom the Son chooses to reveal him. Jesus says, not only am I making the impossible a reality, right? The unbelievable, achievable. All things are given to me. I'm in control of all things. I am king. And that's what we see in our study in Colossians. We see it in the Gospel of John. We see it all through. Jesus is king. That's who we can come to. That's who we can come to. He is the one, the only one. And he says, take my yoke. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. He says, come to me in trust. Trust me, because I'm worthy of your trust. And be my disciple. Submit to me. Make me king in your life. Get in harness with me, right? And this word, this yoke is easy. It means it fits. Of course it fits. It was custom made for you, right? That's who Jesus is. And then he says, learn from me. This picture here, they're training these oxen to work as a team and to pull this load. That's what they're doing here. And Don explained that to me, and I was very impressed with that. And when Jesus says, come learn to me, he's not some taskmaster driving a whip when he says, take this yoke. That's not him. He's the yoke mate in the yoke with you. And he's one, frankly, pulling the heaviest load. Because we can't do it. And that's how we learn how to walk with him, is because we're in harness with him. We walk with him. And he with us in a yoke that's custom made for us. And because he's carrying the load, it's easy. What does he ask us to do? The core of our Christianity. 1 John 3 and 23, to believe in the one he sent and love one another. If you love me, you'll keep my commandments. That's not complicated. It may not be easy, but it sure is simple. Right? And then his promise is rest. I love this image of rest. I don't know about you, brothers and sisters, but many, many times I just feel a weariness in my bones. Right? And we know people that feel a weariness from trying to be righteous on our own by what we do, to be right with God just based on what we do, or we get tired of carrying a load of guilt for the things we've done or not done, or we get tired of living in fear, don't we? Some of our brothers in Africa live in fear of darkness. They live in fear of witchcraft and dark powers, their ancestors, right? Or we live in a fear of death, loneliness. The list goes on. We're not called to live a life of fear because Jesus has conquered all that. He's king. He lives. He reigns, right? He gives a rest from that, and nobody else can do that. That's the peace with God that Paul talks about in Romans 5, verses 1, right? And then he says, learn from me, for I'm gentle and humble heart, for you will find rest for your souls. Not only is He going to give it, you're going to find it, right? Do we need to find some rest from this striving that we do all the time to try to find some sense of worth in our accomplishment or our own beauty or our own intelligence or our own gifts or ability or whatever? Or trying to find our security or joy or confidence in the things we own or accumulate, when we know deep down that it all can disappear overnight in a fire or a crash of a stock market, right? We need some peace from those things. We need to find some peace from those things. Or how about trying to find peace from being constantly disappointed and trying to find truth or purpose or justice in beliefs or philosophies or traditions or societies, institutions, or governments? Peace not found there. Jesus says, come to me. That's where you're going to find peace. This is the peace of God that Paul's talking about in Philippians chapter 4. That's rest, people. That's rest. And this is the passage that struck me as I learned to love and know my brothers in Africa. Because it's not about a religion. It's about a relationship with Jesus Christ. That's what we do. And it should be fairly simple. To believe in the one He sent and love one another. If you love me, you obey my commandments. Don't disappoint your king. Right? And yet, and this passage is the one that stuck out to me the whole time as I was writing in my journal while I was in Africa. This is the passage. But when I went to put it down on paper this week, to speak to you this morning, I really had to struggle with it, to be honest with you. I'm preaching to me now, right? I'm preaching to me. And I asked myself, why? Could it be perhaps that there are some aspects of my life that I haven't totally brought to Jesus? Maybe so. So I need to repent of that. I bet I'm not alone, right? And that's what our purpose is this morning, trying to share this message of encouragement to you, is that this work that we're involved in Zambia, and that the Hillcrest Church is still involved in, is a good work. These brothers are encouraged when we go over there and study with them. And they are learning. They're 10 or 12 years old in the faith, right? And they're learning how to walk with Jesus in this yoke. And they're doing very well. And we have so many who have labored so hard to thank for their efforts over there. But this is a lesson we can learn from them. This is a good work. We need to be involved in this as we get a chance to go back a couple of times every year. And this goes into our great day of giving. This is how we fund these trips. And I just want to say thank you, church, for allowing me to go and for affording me the opportunity to go. It was great. I really enjoyed it. And it also reminds us that in our 21st century mission effort, 21st century American mission efforts, that we can't carry our 21st century American faith traditions or religion to remote places on the earth. The only thing we can carry is Jesus Christ. That's what we carry. That's the message. He's the one. And frankly, we need to be reminded that's the most important thing we can bring into our lives and the lives of the community around us, is to bring the peace of Jesus Christ. Brothers and sisters, as we wrap up this morning, if any of you want to come to Jesus and Him alone and let Him be King in your life, and if you want to be yoked with Him, make Him King and walk through this life with Him, then now's a good time. We can do that. We can talk to you about a commitment to Jesus, baptize you and clothe you in Jesus Christ, and you can belong to Him, be united with Him. And if any of you, sometimes like me, are walking with Jesus, but seem to be pulling in the opposite direction on this yoke sometimes, on certain things, maybe, you'd like us to help you bring all that to Jesus in prayer and give it to Him, then this is a good time to do that this morning, brothers and sisters.